It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a Republican political strategist who you can follow on X at The Thomas Guide. John Thomas, welcome.
Hey, John, good to be with you.
So, on Election Day here, as people are still standing in line, voting at voting centers up and down the state, filling out their ballots, taking it to the post office, getting it postmarked today, what is your read on the gubernatorial election?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, what a wild ride it has been, and pretty pathetic, honestly, that this is the best cast of Democratic characters that the Democratic Party in a state as blue as California could put up. But what I'm watching is, look, it appears to be Javier Becerra will take the top slot. That seems to be pretty safe at this point. He's kind of taken over for Swalwell. And it appears that Steve Hilton will get into a second place. But, depending upon the polling, depending upon the turnout model, you see Tom Steyer could be interchangeable for either of those two. So those are the things, I'm watching. And the other thing that's fascinating here, John, is that moderate Democrats have no appeal in a state like California. Matt Mahan came out with all this fanfare from the tech bros and those in Northern California, and he's sitting at what, 3-4% in polling, even though he spent tens of millions of dollars.
It seems as if the Las Vegas odds makers have it at Becerra over 90%. They have Hilton at 75%, and they have Steyer at, what was it, Randy, 20-something percent?
According to Kalshi, right now, Tom Steyer has a 34% chance of it. Oh, just went up to 35% chance of advancing.
What do you make of that? Why do you think Las Vegas and the people who are placing the bets have Steve Hilton so far above Tom Steyer in terms of the odds?
Well, I think that's a pretty safe bet, actually, because typically in these kinds of contests, you generally see coalescing where a particular party kind of coalesces around one top candidate. And although Chad Bianco, I like him, he's a good candidate, Steve Hilton really has become kind of the definitive Trump-endorsed Republican in the state. I think, look, he kind of checks all the boxes that the base would need to kind of get the joke here. Donald Trump has repeatedly pronounced his endorsement. The Democrats have sent out mailers attacking Steve Hilton, but basically trying to attacking him to Republicans to coalesce his vote. And then, of course, I don't think I've gone a day or more that Steve Hilton hasn't been on a Fox News hit, where you really can't say the same for Chad Bianco. So I think the bet on Hilton is that the Republicans kind of come home, they coalesce, which I think is safe. And Steyer's, again, a little bit of a wild card there, but I think it is a pretty safe bet on Hilton at this point.
Let's just say that it is Becerra versus Hilton, that is what the November ballot looks like. What do you think Hilton's chances are at winning that election?
Oof. I struggle to see a pathway simply because states like California are so hyper-partisan, and the numbers, aren't really there for a Republican. However, there are a few kind of black swan glimmers of hope here. One would be, if you look at in terms of independent voters or no party preference, actually Steve Hilton is leading the field above Becerra with independents. So people kind of who don't like the status quo, they're looking for something else. So maybe there's an in there. And then I think the other wild card is that Becerra gets caught up in some kind of Department of Justice scandal. And if that happens, all bets are off.
Who would be your first call to if you were Steve Hilton and you made it to the November ballot? Would it be to Matt Mahan asking for his endorsement?
Probably, yeah. Mahan should. I mean, if he's intellectually honest, he should get there. You try to do that. I think I would also go back to. I'd go to places like Jerry Brown. I'd go to Governor Schwarzenegger. I'd try to coalesce statewide figures that were thought to be a little bit more moderate, and try to get mods on your side. Try to do that. It's going to be tough because what you're going to see, John, because Becerra is thought to be the obvious winner, you're going to see a very quick coalescing of every local, state, and national Democratic figure that you can think off the top of your head. They're all going to rally from Obama, Biden, Clinton, just the who's going to quickly coalesce around Becerra. So time is short if you're Hilton. The other is you got to put together a war chest, John. If Hilton has a shot, I mean, he's going to have to spend over $100 million. And he could potentially do that if he catches fire and small donors across the country smell victory. It could be done, but it's still very tough in a state like California.
Newspapers across the nation are going to write the political obituary of Matt Mahan on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, some point in the future. What do you think those obits are going to say? Why didn't it work?
I think they're going to say probably got in too late, couldn't excite enthusiasm. I didn't have. They're going to say they didn't have enough money. Porter's obviously already blaming Steyer for leaking videos. I think Porter's going to blame misogyny. That it's just women can't get ahead in that state, which is ironic because wasn't it Kamala Harris who was a statewide elected official and there's so many others. I'm not sure that argument, that blame game really passes the sniff test. But I think what you're not going to see, John, I think the most telling, you're not going to see the LA Times and the Sacramento Bee and the New York Times talk about the truth, which is the Democratic Party has shifted so extreme and so far left that they're really only interested in socialism and Trump derangement. And those are really the two animating factors of the modern Democratic Party.
Do you think today is the last time we'll ever see Antonio Villaraigosa's name on a ballot?
But that's a good question. Statewide, yes. I don't think he can go statewide. But, local office, if he just had a thirst for serving on the Board of Supervisors, LA City Council, I wouldn't be terribly shocked to see him run for those things. Now, maybe you could argue that's below his pay grade, but I get the sense that the man just wants to be relevant and he wants to serve. So done for statewide, done for probably national office, but local, I wouldn't count him out at this point.
Katie Porter has run for statewide office 2 times, 2 cycles in a row, and assuming the polls are correct, she will lose in the election today. Do you think she's done, or do you think she finds another office to run for?
Boy, that's another good one. Well, I wish she were done for the sake of the country and Californians. I don't actually think she's done. I think this is her life's purpose. I think her ego is so large that really she will blame misogyny. It's anything but her fault. So I think you're going to see her run again for some kind of state office, down ticket, probably attorney general, I think is the most obvious fit. I mean, look, John, and these down ticket races, particularly, statewide, but down the statewide ticket, the biggest hurdle for most of these races, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Treasurer, is simply name ID creation. She has name ID. So I think if she runs for a lesser office, she can be the only candidate with the most name ID and kind of slide in. The other thing she could do is pivot to run for a local prosecutorial agency or board of supervisors in Orange County. I have a feeling she feels that's below her ego level. So I would bet if you had a gun to my head that she's going to run for attorney general and that's where she'll land.
She seems to really hate Tom Steyer, who she blames for producing that video that caused her campaign to implode. I kind of get the impression that that's just something in her life she's never going to get over.
I think Katie's known to hold grudges, particularly against men, is the sense I've got there. But look, whether or not it was Steyer who leaked it, that's the nature of these high-profile races. Is that if it's not going to be Steyer, it's going to be one of your other opponents. So I think she needs to get over it. If I were counseling her, John, I'd say, look, this is a sport. You entered the arena, you're going to get smacked. Stop blaming. If it wasn't Steyer, it'd be somebody else who leaked it. Stop blaming others. And how about not screaming at your staff and try being a nice person? That's a place to start.
One of the possibilities is that we could end up with Tom Steyer versus Javier Becerra, an all-Democratic, top-of-the-ticket Republican lockout. Does the Democratic Party want that, or do they want one Democrat and one Republican so they can check the box and move on?
Oh, it'd be a nightmare for the Democrats to have two Dems at the top of the ticket, because if you have a Democrat like Becerra and then you have Hilton, it kind of just got to go through the motions. And Becerra is what is considered by the establishment kind of a safe choice. And by the way, I think he's safe because it's not because he's competent. I think he's a total idiot and useless. It's because he's manipulable. Like special interests and unions in particular in the state can own him and tell him what they want to do, and that'll be that. The state won't be well run, but the money will flow where it needs to flow for the interests. The problem with the Steyer-Becerra matchup is the establishment Democrats do not want Tom Steyer to be the governor. And if Steyer's in this race, I could see a scenario where Steyer is the next governor. So no, Democrats want this to be an R and a D for sure.
Let's move on to the LA mayor's race. Who do you think is going to get a ticket to move on in November?
Well, it appears to be obviously Karen Bass, although amazingly, I mean, she is so badly damaged and weakened for an incumbent. It's really too bad. I think we haven't seen a stronger candidate kind of step up, because I think this but one of those cycles she could have been defeated. And then it appears to be Pratt at this point, will go to a runoff between the two of them. And then I think it again becomes more of a partisan game at that point. I struggle to see a path for Pratt. I give him kudos for throwing his hat in the ring. I think he's run a good race. But I just see how you escape the mechanics that is LA City in an R&D contest.
What do you make of him as a candidate? Because I've had him on the show twice, and I have been thoroughly impressed each time he's appeared on the program. Based on the email and the calls that we get, the audience seems to agree. He seems to have found lightning in a bottle in this race. I just don't know, given the politics of Los Angeles, if it'll be enough to win the seat, but he certainly has performed well to my eye.
Well, he certainly outperformed where I thought he'd be when you first saw him get in. But he's really captured what I would say, John, is the most valuable thing in politics, which is he's authentic and he's credible. When he delivers his message about caring to change LA, that LA's hit rock bottom, that it's incompetent, I believe that he believes that, because he suffered the consequences. He and his family did by having his home burned down, etc. So that level of raw authenticity is so rare. Donald Trump had it, but you don't see it a lot. And so he's captured that, and then he's poured kerosene all over it to get more attention. And so far it's worked. And now he's early on, he kind of coalesced kind of the MAGA influencers. He's a fixture on right-wing media outlets. So I think the Republicans are kind of understanding that. And Pratt is trying to reach out beyond the base. I think it's going to be difficult for him, I think, to beat a Bass, simply, I said, because of the partisan dynamics. I think the real long-term coattails of Pratt here is that if you're a reality celebrity or a celebrity, and you're in a different state, and you're watching this, John, as we go into the next presidential cycle, you may think, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and run, because now Pratt has trailblazed the blueprint for people who are celebrities to gin up enthusiasm and become viable political candidates.
Usually when an incumbent is running for re-election, the focus of the news media is on the performance of the incumbent and not the challenger. This time around, in this race, most of the focus has been on Spencer Pratt, has been on things that he has done or said at some point in the past, on the character that he played on the television show, whatever. The focus is on him and not on Bass. Do you think that's because of media bias, or do you think they're doing it because he's a more interesting person than her?
I think it's both. Pratt, Karen is the most boring candidate, you can remember. She really is a placeholder candidate. I mean, she kind of checks the identity box that a Democratic candidate should. She had when she was a member of Congress, I think she was one of the least remarkable members. there. And as mayor, I mean, I really can't think of anything she's done. The only thing I can think of things she's messed up or not done. But Pratt has kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room because he's interesting. It is an interesting story that a reality show celebrity could potentially be the next mayor. And then, of course, remember, the local media doesn't want to fixate on how bad their favorite Democratic choice was because, remember, they also backed her over Rick Caruso last go around. And so, of course, they don't want to look like they were wrong in recommending people to vote for Bass over Caruso.
Last question before you go. Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, announced that she is not running for re-election. She's retiring from public office. Scott Wiener, the state senator from San Francisco, who generates a lot of attention, much of it negative, he announced that he was going to run for Congress before she said she was going to retire. She didn't like that, clearly. Now she's endorsed Connie Chan, who is a liberal member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, who's running against Scott Wiener. Why do you think Pelosi did that? Do you think it's still sour grapes from him announcing his candidacy before she retired? Do you think that she thinks he's too far to the left? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I don't think it's that she thinks he's too far to the left. I've dealt with this dynamic many times in my career, John, where a longtime incumbent wants to feel that they're in control of their successor. So I really think at the core of it is that she's upset that he pulled the trigger and ran for her seat without her blessing and her go ahead, and she just kind of never looked back. And look, the other thing is, Wiener probably figured through whether he talked to her explicitly or her people, that he wasn't going to get her support. Otherwise, he would have waited and probably, genuflected, kissed the ring in due time. But he decided to get out there, beforehand to try to become a viable contender. I think really at the core of it, it's a petty thing that Pelosi doesn't give a rip about viability. She's just upset that she wasn't in charge of controlling who's going to take over her seat.
John Thomas, Republican political strategist. You can follow him on X at The Thomas Guide. And John, you're going to come back and join us later on in the week and go over all the results with us.
Yeah, I can't wait. And thanks for all your election coverage, John.
All right. John Thomas, everyone. Thanks so much for stopping by.